Sunday, February 4th, 1996, was supposed to be the end of a peaceful weekend for 34-year-old Roxanne Duehren and her husband, 34-year-old Derek Duehren, at their huge farmhouse in Gales Creek, Oregon. Roxanne had planned to spend the day looking after her horses at her in-house horse farm. Unfortunately, later that afternoon, something vile happened. Roxanne and Derek's secluded dream house in the outskirts of the town went up in flames.
See flames coming out of every opening, door, window. That usually means that it's been a period of time before we've gotten there.
But that wasn't even the worst part. Roxanne was still inside her burning home when the neighbors spotted clouds of dense smoke emerging from the Duehren residence. When the fire department arrived and the flames were finally put to rest, it was already too late. Roxanne was gone, but where was Derek? Was he alive? Was the fire an unfortunate accident or a thoroughly planned attack? Welcome to Mysterious 7, where we shed light on under-the-radar cases from across the country. Today, we'll be looking into the insanely twisted and bizarre case of Roxanne Duehren and her mysterious death. Before we begin, if you haven't subscribed to our channel, please hit the subscribe and like buttons. Now, without any further ado, let's dive into the case. Gales Creek is an unincorporated community in Washington County, Oregon, United States, in the foothills of the Oregon Coast Range. Famous for its natural beauty, the secluded town serves as a perfect getaway spot from the busy and fast city life. The city also offers a great set of trails and campsites, which make it a huge attraction. Conveniently located between Portland and the coast, Gales Creek is a great place to explore. Although Gales Creek is a comparatively safe place to live when compared to other places in America, one of the most mysterious crimes occurred here back in 1996. Roxanne Marie Duehren was born as Roxanne Kuhn on September 21, 1961. She grew up with two sisters and a brother, but was significantly closer to Barbara, one of her sisters. However, not much is known about Roxanne's early life. In 1987, the then 26-year-old Roxanne married the love of her life, Derek Duehren. Roxanne and Derek had great chemistry and seemed like the perfect couple. Although they were both working busy jobs in the computer industry, they always made time for each other away from their stressful jobs. By 1996, when Roxanne was 34, she and Derek had moved to a large home in Gales Creek, Oregon, which was only about a half an hour from Portland. The couple's dream home was in a secluded area in the woods of the city, which gave them the illusion of being away from everybody. When the couple bought that property in Gales Creek, Roxanne was overjoyed. It was more than she had ever dreamed of having.
When they bought that property in Gales Creek, that was more than my sister would have ever have dreamed of having. That was her dream come true.
Roxanne and Derek lived peacefully with their cats and dogs in the huge house, but Roxanne's love for her horses was unmatched. With a lot of open land, she made sure that their house had a horse farm. Roxanne's horses were her balance in life. She found solace in taking care of them and loved spending time with them.
She loved her horses. They were her balance in life, and she loved showing them. She loved spending time with them. That was her downtime and her stress relief, I'm sure.
After living there for several years, Roxanne and Derek began construction on a 1,500 square foot addition to their farmhouse, but they would never see it completed. Around 2 p.m. on Sunday, February 4th, 1996, Derek had left to go to a supermarket while Roxanne was still home. Later that afternoon, neighbors who lived about a quarter of a mile away from the Duehrens saw dense clouds of smoke in the distance. Even though the source of the fire was not visible to any of the neighbors, it seemed to be emerging from Roxanne and Derek's home.
Fire was actually reported by folks that lived more than a quarter mile away. The house was not visible to any of the neighbors.
Worried, they immediately phoned the fire department, who took about 20 minutes to arrive. When they arrived, the fire had only gotten more intense, with massive flames covering the whole house.
See flames coming out of every opening, door, window. That usually means that it's been a period of time before we've gotten there.
As Derek was returning after shopping, he too saw the smoke and rushed home. The firefighters were working hard to extinguish the stubborn fire. Derek saw Roxanne's car in the garage and feared the worst. He realized that Roxanne must still be inside the house. Frantically, Derek told the first responders about it, but they couldn't do anything until the fire was at least under control.
Derek ran up towards the fire and dropped to his knees and screamed that he believed that his wife was inside.
Well, that's the worst thing that you can possibly hear is that someone's inside. You still have the sense that you want to try to get in there and possibly see if they're alive.
It took the fire department approximately 3 hours to completely put the fire out. By that time, Roxanne and Derek's dream house had already burned to the ground. And tragically, Roxanne's charred remains were discovered in the home. Roxanne's body had been burnt horrifically, and her remains weighed only about 35 pounds.
The body had been burnt horrifically.
Her remains were little more than 35 pounds. They were so limited that the medical examiner was unable to determine the cause of death.
Detective Larry McKinney was assigned to work on the case. The severe condition of Roxanne's body made the identification process even more challenging, and as the dental records were not going to be of any help, medical examiners decided to make use of bone marrow material and collected samples from Roxanne's parents.
So what we did was take bone marrow material, submit it to the laboratory. They got some samples from the parents and proved her identity by DNA.
Through that process, the remains were confirmed to be that of 34-year-old Roxanne.
From that moment on, you have a loss and you're frightened and you're scared. But it just seemed from there, it went into a bad dream that just turned into a nightmare.
The detectives found the fire to be very strange. They were puzzled about how it grew to such a great extent and wondered whether Roxanne ever tried to escape or call for help. When questioned by the police, Derek gave an explanation for the fire. He claimed that the fire was an accident. Derek told the detectives he and Roxanne had woken up a little late that Sunday morning and that it was a lazy sort of day.
Derek said it had been a normal Sunday. They had awakened kind of late, and he had made breakfast for his wife. And it was just a lazy sort of day, but there were frozen pipes because of the weather.
After dragging himself to the kitchen and making breakfast for his wife, Derek went down to the utility room. He found that the pipes were frozen due to the weather, so he turned on the washing machine to unfreeze them. He stated that the machine used propane gas, which was highly flammable, and he'd left the machine's door open. But before he left the house, he forgot to turn off the machine.
It is pretty dangerous like that. It lays down in the low areas and get a lot of people get hurt from that.
Something was still not adding up. As a matter of routine, detectives asked Derek for the store receipt to prove he was shopping, and he willingly complied. Although Derek handed over his receipt from the grocery store he claimed to have gone to, the police still didn't know if he was telling the truth about everything.
There was a receipt that showed that he, in fact, had been at the store on the day in question.
The police also noticed that Derek had a few scratches on his face, and Derek had an explanation for that as well.
His explanation was that he was clearing debris that had fallen during the ice storm across the road that led up to his residence. The explanation is in moving these branches that he scratched himself across the face.
The police weren't convinced that the fire was an accident, as Derek claimed. The police looked into other possible theories about how the fire was set. The police noticed that Roxanne's car battery was disconnected. They thought it was possible that the battery could have sparked and ignited a fire.
The car was brought up as a possible origin of the fire, that somehow a battery cable had caused a spark.
The garage was near the part of the house that was being remodeled. Only the frames for the walls were up, so the fire could have spread faster through the house. But that possibility was ruled out when forensic experts examined the battery and didn't find any signs of it being the cause of the fire.
Forensic experts retained by the state to examine the vehicle found no indication that would suggest to them that there was any type of arcing that caused this fire to occur or start in the vehicle and then spread into the house.
Several factors made the fire suspicious to the police. The detectives were already doubtful about Derek's claims, and suspicion grew when Detective Larry McKinney found small pellets near the washing machine.
And it all seemed to be in a small little pile right near the origin of the fire.
At first, he couldn't identify what they were, but soon he learned that it was kitty litter.
I thought about this for about 3 days, and we had a cat at the time, and it wasn't until I had to change the kitty litter that I determined, hey, that's a type of kitty litter.
Roxanne and Derek did have cats, but the litter box wasn't anywhere near their utility room where the fire was suspected to have started. Detective Larry brought a bag of the cat litter found at the crime scene back to his office.
I went out and bought a bag of it and brought it back to my office and actually had it sitting in my cubicle and trying to figure out why that would be there.
As he tried to figure out why there'd be cat litter near the origin place of the fire, it had been sitting in his office for quite a while until a fellow detective asked him about it. The detective was a former Boy Scout, and he said that soaking cat litter with gasoline was an old trick to help start campfires.
He walked by and asked me if I was going to start a fire. That detective worked burglary cases and really didn't know what kind of a case I was involved in. And I said, "Why would you ask me that?"
A background check was conducted on Derek Duehren, which revealed that he too was an Eagle Scout in his youth and might have known about this method of starting fires. However, Derek claimed that the litter was unrelated to the fire, and regardless of that, the investigators found no clear evidence of arson. Detectives brought in arson dogs, also called accelerant detection canines, to sniff out minute traces of accelerant that may have been used to start a fire. But the dogs didn't detect the presence of accelerants anywhere in the house, including in the burned cat litter. In terms of possible foul play, Derek and Roxanne had no known enemies, and by all accounts had a happy marriage. The detectives also found fragments of a handgun next to where Roxanne's body was found, indicating a potential crime scene. Derek explained that there had been a closet in which he'd kept all his weapons next to where Roxanne's body was found. The medical examiner x-rayed Roxanne's body, but it was so badly burnt that it was impossible to find out whether she'd been shot or not. But things turned twisted when the medical examiner's final report arrived with some intriguing results. The report stated that Roxanne's remains showed no sign of smoke inhalation. She didn't have any ash or soot in her lungs, but there was also only a small amount of carbon monoxide present in her blood. The report concluded that Roxanne wasn't breathing when the fire started and had died before the house was set ablaze. Although the medical examiners couldn't determine the exact cause of death, they did find traces of blood in her airway. This indicated that whatever the cause of Roxanne's death was, it was violent and personal, but definitely not a fire. Detective Larry was now sure that this was a homicide.
This to me is a homicide. There's no other reasonable explanation as for why a healthy young woman is dead before a fire starts.
She had obviously died by some sort of violent means because she had aspirated blood. And from my past experience, people that aspirate blood means that there was some sort of horrific injury to their face or head, and their last breaths are taking in blood rather than air.
Roxanne Duehren did not die in the fire, which means somebody caused her death.
A closer look into the seemingly happy couple's life revealed that Roxanne and Derek were known to argue a lot, mostly about finances, but particularly the money Roxanne spent on her horses. Not very long ago, she'd gotten a horse barn and a riding arena built for them. She was also taking cutting lessons, a sport where a horse and its rider must separate a cow from the herd and keep it separated until the cow either stops moving or turns away. Each session of these lessons cost around $300.
At a horse barn built, a riding arena, she was taking what's called cutting lessons for, I believe they cost $300 per lesson.
Moreover, Derek had learned through his job at Intel that soon he'd be transferred to a location that was about 150 miles away from Gales Creek. Roxanne was completely against moving to another place, as she could not leave her horses behind. Barbara, Roxanne's sister, said that Roxanne didn't want to move, and when she started standing up for herself, it led to conflicts between Roxanne and Derek.
I think that Roxanne said to him, "Derek, you go rent an apartment or we'll buy you someplace up there and then you come back on weekends." I don't think my sister wanted to move. I think that she voiced that probably pretty clearly to him, and I don't think he liked it.
As the investigation into the couple's married life continued, the police continued to examine the washing machine. The police discovered that the propane gas line to the washing machine had not been connected at the time the fire was set. Derek suggested that it could have gotten disconnected when the firefighters put out the fire, but since the disconnected hose had a threaded metal end, Bruce Wong, a forensic metallurgist, found no evidence that firefighters had made the disconnection. He determined that the propane gas line was disconnected before the fire was set, and hence Derek's claims were debunked.
Firefighters are not concerned about destroying evidence. They're there to put the fire out and to save human life.
Mr. Wong also saw tiny brass beads sitting on top of the oxide deposit on the threads of the metal fitting. This was only possible if the gas line had been disconnected before the fire had started. It further backed up his findings and proved that the fire was set deliberately.
Because if the threads, once they lock in order for them to thread, they'd have to strip it to pull out. These threads did not show that characteristic. What I see there tells me that this pipe was open at the time of the fire, that's sufficiently open at the time of fire so that the deposit could occur.
Indicated that the connection was open, which would indicate that the fire was deliberately set.
Derek told me that the dryer was running, and it couldn't have been running because it was not connected at the time. And that was a provable lie.
Fire investigators now made their official ruling. The fire at the Duehren house was in fact arson.
And all of a sudden, everything starts making sense. And you fall into that area that you can actually follow what happens then. It makes sense, and you can forensically prove that.
Suspicion intensified when the police found a stain on Derek's jeans that he'd been wearing on the day of the fire. When questioned about it, Derek said that it was mud.
I asked him specifically if it was blood, and he told me no, it was mud.
A phenolphthalein test was conducted, and the stain was determined to be Roxanne's blood. Consequently, after a month-long investigation into Roxanne's death, Derek was arrested and charged with arson and murder in March 1996. During the trial, Derek appeared to be overly confident. He was egoistic towards the authorities and behaved as if the law was beneath him.
Derek Duehren thought he was smarter than everyone else. He was sending emails to friends of his, co-workers at Intel, updating them on the trial as it was going along, talking about it in terms of being a chess match, and his view of how that chess game was going, and his expectation that he would be acquitted.
The trial began with the prosecution stating that Derek and Roxanne allegedly had a heated argument on the day of her death, during which he lost his temper and physically attacked her. The prosecution then pointed out that Derek had 3 parallel scratches and a 4th diagonal scratch, apparently from fingernails, on his face back on the day of the fire. They indicated that these scratches were evidence of Derek's violent confrontation with Roxanne and her fighting back by scratching. Despite Roxanne showing resistance, Derek managed to overpower and kill her. He then set fire to the house and went to the grocery store to establish an alibi. Mr. Worley from the defense testified that Derek told him that while cleaning up on the morning of February 4, 1996, Roxanne accidentally brushed a rake on Derek's face when they were trying to break up a fight between their dogs. This explanation was supported by the testimony of 4 other witnesses who had witnessed violent fights between the couple's dogs. The prosecution then stated that Derek had lied to the police officers about the scratches on his face. He earlier claimed the scratches were a result of injuries he received while removing the branches from the side of his driveway. He even went so far as to show officers the exact spot where he had allegedly cleared the branches. The defense presented testimony from Mrs. Regal, a tragic situation human psychology expert. In her testimony, Mrs. Regal provided rationale for Derek, stating that he was unintentionally not fully truthful about the scratches that tragic and confusing evening. The testimony further supported the explanation that Derek was scratched by Roxanne while breaking up a dogfight and later by the branches, which placed a small 4th diagonal scratch under his right eye. The prosecution pointed out that the stain of Roxanne's blood found on her lower back leg portion of Derek's jeans indicated that the couple had been in a physical altercation which turned bloody. The defense gave multiple reasons explaining how the bloodstain did not support a bloody fight theory. They explained that the stain's pattern and location on the pants was unusual. It couldn't have possibly been a result of a bloody person-to-person fight. Following the bloodstain test, Derek's clothes were further examined, and there wasn't a single speck of blood anywhere else on Derek's clothes. There was also no swelling or marks on Derek's hands or knuckles to indicate a fight. Further, the defense presented photos which showed that Roxanne and Derek had similar waistlines and similar overall size. This piece of evidence was consistent with Derek's claims that Roxanne would often wear his pants. The defense argued while wearing these pants and riding her horse, Roxanne could have wiped bloody fingers from a wound or a bloody nose on the pants leg. The age of the bloodstain, however, was not known. There was no evidence that the bloodstain was fresh. Later, the state presented a report by Dr. Larry Luman, the state medical examiner. In his report, Mr. Luman stated that Roxanne died by some undetermined homicidal violence. He backed up his results based on his findings that there was no soot or ash in Roxanne's airway, and the initial tests of dried bodily fluids showed approximately 3% of carbon monoxide, which was a non-fatal level. On top of that, Mr. Luman also found a large amount of blood in the remaining bit of distal trachea, the point where the lungs join at the top. This indicated that Roxanne had breathed and choked on blood from a severe beating or non-lethal facial injury. The defense countered these claims, saying that there was no damage found to any part of Roxanne's remains, including the skull and all the major organs of the body. And since there was no evidence of any specific cause of death presented to the jury, the defense called the prosecution's allegations a mere theory with no solid proof to back it up. Towards the end of the trial, the state brought up their theory that Derek made Roxanne upset when he told her about his transfer, and she probably fought back. But they failed to present any evidence which showed a negative side to Derek's character in general, or to his relationship with his wife Roxanne. To shed light on Derek's nature, the defense presented testimonies which stated that Derek was a peaceful and harmonious person. Witnesses claimed that Derek would often show many outward signs of love and support for Roxanne and her love for her horses. She even claimed that he attended horse shows with Roxanne and helped her build the horse barn and massive riding arena. The defense closed the statement saying that Derek was a patient, loving, generous, and forgiving person. After spending hours listening to both sides, the jury, however, was unable to reach a unanimous decision on charging Derek with the first-degree murder of Roxanne Duehren.
The jury was unable to make a determination on the charge of murder. Unable to decide. They did not find Mr. Duehren not guilty of murder. They simply said, we are unable to come to a decision.
Since Roxanne's cause of death remained undetermined, ultimately, Derek was found guilty of arson and first-degree manslaughter. Under Oregon law, manslaughter in the first degree is defined as recklessly causing the death of another human being under circumstances manifesting extreme indifference to the value of human life.
Manslaughter in first degree is defined under Oregon law as recklessly causing the death of another human being under circumstances manifesting extreme indifference to the value of human life.
Did Derek think he could get away with this? Absolutely. Absolutely. Derek thought that he could be smarter than all of them. His ego was that big, and those people were beneath him.
In 1996 itself, Derek was handed a sentence of 10 years in prison. On Thursday, November 30th, 2006, after completing his sentence, Derek was released from prison. He also completed an additional 3 years of required post-prison supervision with no reported incidents. Shortly after his release, he took up a job and started planning the rest of his life. On October 15th, 2010, he got married to a woman named Janine in a simple ceremony on the side of the Columbia River. His new wife, Janine, is a retired radio personality and radio station owner who describes Derek as the most gentle, thoughtful, and loving man she's ever known. They now live on 11 rural acres where they also sheltered their rescued animals. In 2013, Derek earned an MBA from the University of Portland and has been employed since his release. Now semi-retired, Derek works part-time as a licensed handyman, and Janine manages their real estate holdings. He dreams of developing a 6-acre animal rescue farm and traveling the world. Ever since he was released in 2006, Derek has claimed that he didn't kill Roxanne and was wrongfully charged. Derek said that even though he lost the most productive years of his life to prison, he was happy that good fortune had found him again. He's thankful to all his friends who stood by him and happy that his life is finally treating him well. Although the case was closed long ago, there are still many unanswered questions about Roxanne's death and the complexities and uncertainties that came with it. Investigators said that this case proved that no matter what someone did to cover their tracks, something would always be left behind.
People do think when they start a fire that it's going to burn up everything and destroy all the evidence that they did it. And that's a fallacy that we like people to believe, because we can go back in as investigators and pretty well find out what caused the fire.
The fire in this case was so severe that it destroyed a lot of the type of evidence that you might normally find at a homicide scene. However, the fire itself creates evidence. And in this particular case, the fire itself and how it started and where it started became crucial evidence in the prosecution.
They always get caught in the end. Sometimes it takes a while, but they get caught.
This case was based almost exclusively on forensics, even though I like to think that I have something to do with it. But in actuality, in this case, it was forensics that found him guilty.
Even though Derek completed his sentence and is now a free man, do you think he actually murdered Roxanne? What do you think really happened that day between Roxanne and Derek? Let us know your thoughts. We'd love to hear from you. If there's a case you'd like us to cover, don't hesitate to drop your recommendations in the comment section below. For more captivating true crime stories, like, share, and subscribe to our channel.